I never imagined that a birthday invitation would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. My name is John, and I own a small Chinese restaurant in San Bernardino. For 16 years I was married to Chelsea, a yoga instructor with a smile that could light up any room. We had 2 kids, lived in a modest apartment near downtown, and from the outside, everything looked perfect. But perfection is just an illusion we maintain until reality shatters it. The cracks in our marriage started appearing gradually. Chelsea became distant, her laughter less frequent, her touch more mechanical. I convinced myself it was stress from work, from raising the kids, from life itself. We stopped having meaningful conversations, replacing them with logistics about school pickups and grocery lists. Our intimacy became scheduled, obligatory, devoid of passion. I told myself this was normal, that all marriages went through phases like this. Then came that Friday afternoon in March when everything changed. I was at the restaurant, reviewing inventory in the back office, when my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. It was from Sarah, Chelsea's best friend since college. The photo showed a group of women standing in front of a sleek private plane, champagne glasses raised, celebration mode in full effect. The caption read, "Birthday vibes with my girls. Thanks Hank for the amazing flight experience." I stared at the image, my finger hovering over it to zoom in. There was Chelsea, looking radiant in a way I hadn't seen in years. Her eyes sparkled with genuine joy, her posture relaxed and confident. But it wasn't her happiness that made my stomach drop. It was the way she was positioned slightly apart from the other women, angled toward someone outside the frame. And then I noticed the reflection in the plane's polished surface. A tall man in a pilot's uniform, and Chelsea's gaze fixed directly on him. Something felt wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. I tried calling Chelsea, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted her asking about her day. No response. By evening, when she finally came home, her cheeks were flushed, her movements hurried. "How was your day?" I asked casually. "Oh, just boring yoga classes and errands," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I'm exhausted. Going to shower and head to bed early." That was the lie that confirmed my suspicions. This was the moment when I understood, there was no going back. The next morning I did something I never thought I would do. I told Chelsea I had an early meeting with a supplier, but instead I waited down the street in my car. At 9:30 she emerged from our apartment building wearing jeans and a leather jacket I'd never seen before. She got into her car and drove off. I followed, maintaining a careful distance, my heart pounding against my ribcage. She drove for 40 minutes, eventually turning into a small private airfield on the outskirts of San Bernardino. I parked behind a storage building and watched as she walked toward a hangar. A man emerged to meet her, tall, athletic, exactly the build I'd glimpsed in that Instagram reflection. They embraced, and not in the way you hug a casual acquaintance. His hands were on her waist, her arms wrapped around his neck. Then they kissed, long and deep, like lovers who couldn't get enough of each other. I thought it couldn't get worse, but they walked hand in hand to a small private plane. Within minutes, they were taxiing down the runway, and then they were gone, ascending into the clear blue sky together while I sat in my car, feeling like the ground beneath me had opened up and swallowed everything I'd built my life on. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through 1,000 thoughts at once. How long had this been going on? Who was this man? Then I remembered Sarah's post, "Thanks Hank." I pulled over and scrolled through Chelsea's Instagram followers until I found him, Hank Morrison. Private pilot. His profile was mostly set to private, but his profile picture showed him leaning against a plane, that same confident smile. I dug deeper, checking Chelsea's old photos, her comments, her tags. That's when I found it buried 2 years back, a photo from her high school reunion. She'd tagged several people, including Hank Morrison. "Great catching up with old friends," the caption read. Old friends? Old boyfriend more likely. Over the next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. I hired a tech-savvy college student to help me recover deleted messages from our shared cloud backup. What I found made me physically ill. Months of conversations. Romantic messages. Explicit photos. Plans for secret meetups. Chelsea had been seeing Hank for over a year, ever since that reunion. He'd rekindled their high school romance, promising her adventure and excitement, everything she claimed was missing from our boring suburban life. But what devastated me most wasn't just the affair. It was what I discovered buried in her laptop files, financial statements I'd never seen before. Chelsea had been siphoning money from our joint accounts for months, small amounts I'd never noticed, building a secret fund. $23,000. Enough to start a new life. She wasn't just having an affair, She was planning an exit strategy. And then it got even worse. I found emails between Chelsea and a divorce attorney, dated from 2 months earlier. She'd been planning to leave me to take the kids, to claim I was an absent workaholic husband who neglected his family. The attorney had advised her to document everything, to build a case that would give her primary custody and a favorable settlement. She'd been playing the long game, gathering ammunition while I remained oblivious. But here's what she didn't know. I'd been documenting everything too. Every late-night yoga workshop. Every weekend girls' trip. Every lie, now cross-referenced with bank statements, GPS data from her car's tracking system I'd quietly activated, and those recovered messages. I had proof of adultery, financial deception, and her premeditated plan to destroy our family on her terms. I scheduled a meeting with my own attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia who'd handled my restaurant's legal matters for years. When I showed her everything, her eyes widened. John, this is substantial. In California, we're a no-fault divorce state, but evidence of financial misconduct and hidden assets changes everything. The fact that she withdrew marital funds without your knowledge or consent is serious. We can definitely work with this. I don't want revenge, I told her, though that wasn't entirely true. I want justice. I want my kids protected. And I want her to understand that actions have consequences. Patricia smiled grimly. Let me make some calls. I have an idea. What happened next would change everything I thought I knew about my wife. Patricia's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. We would let Chelsea proceed with her plan, let her feel confident and in control, and then pull the rug out at the perfect moment. But we needed more ammunition. Patricia connected me with a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering hidden assets. Within 3 days, he'd found something Patricia described as a gift from the legal gods. Chelsea hadn't just been hiding money in a separate account. She'd been using my restaurant's business credit card for her affair, charging hotel rooms, expensive dinners, even that birthday flight celebration. She'd been careful to keep the amounts small enough that I wouldn't notice them in the monthly expenses, disguising them as business entertainment and client meetings. But altogether, she'd charged nearly $8,000 of affair-related expenses to my business. That wasn't just marital infidelity, it was fraud. This changes everything, Patricia explained during our strategy session. She's been stealing from your business, using company resources for personal use. We can pursue this civilly, but we could also make a case for criminal charges if we wanted to push it. I don't want her in jail, I said quickly. We had kids to think about. But I did want her to face consequences that would actually matter. Patricia leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her legal pad. Here's what I propose. We file for divorce first before she does. We present all the evidence, the affair, the hidden accounts, the business credit card fraud. We seek full disclosure of all her assets and financial dealings. And here's the kicker. We request a forensic audit of all marital finances, which will bring everything into the light. The court will not look kindly on someone who's been systematically deceiving their spouse and stealing from a small business. But what about Hank? I asked. He's part of this too. Patricia's smile turned predatory. Hank Morrison, the pilot? I did some research. He works for Executive Air Services, a charter company. They have a strict morality clause in their contracts. No fraternizing with clients, no using company aircraft for personal purposes. That birthday flight? That was on company time, using company resources. If his employer finds out he's been using their planes to conduct an affair, he'll lose his pilot's license and his job. My reaction shocked even her friends when they found out what I'd done. I filed for divorce on a Wednesday morning. Chelsea was served with papers while teaching a yoga class at the studio where she worked. According to the process server, she went pale and had to excuse herself, leaving a room full of confused students and half-finished sun salutations. She came home that evening, papers in hand, tears streaming down her face. John, we need to talk. This is crazy. We can work through this. Work through what? I asked calmly. I was standing in our kitchen, having just finished preparing dinner for our kids, who were at their grandparents' house. Work through your year-long affair with Hank Morrison? Work through the $23,000 you stole from our joint accounts? Work through the $8,000 in business expenses you charged while sleeping with your ex-boyfriend? Her face went from pale to ashen. How did I find out? Sarah's Instagram post. Really, Chelsea? You couldn't even keep your affair private enough to avoid social media? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot I'd saved. You looked so happy in this photo. Happier than you've looked with me in years. She sank into a chair, her hands shaking. I never meant for this to happen. Hank and we just reconnected at the reunion and it felt like being young again before life got so complicated and... Complicated? I cut her off. We have 2 children together. I've supported your career, your dreams, everything you wanted. And you repaid me by stealing, lying, and planning to destroy our family on your terms. That's not fair, she shouted, suddenly defensive. You're always at that restaurant. You haven't really looked at me, really seen me in years. I felt invisible. So you made yourself very visible to Hank instead. I pulled out the folder Patricia had prepared. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to read these documents very carefully. They detail every lie, every stolen dollar, every fraudulent charge. And then you're going to understand something very important. You don't control this narrative anymore. I do. Over the next hour, I watched Chelsea read through the evidence, her face cycling through shock, anger, denial, and finally devastation. When she finished, she looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. What do you want from me? I want honesty. For once, complete honesty. How long were you planning to leave? She took a shaky breath. 3 months. I was going to file for divorce in June after school ended. Hank promised he'd leave his job and we'd move somewhere new, start fresh. And our children? I was going to fight for primary custody. My lawyer said with your work hours, I'd probably get it. She wiped her eyes. John, I know I've hurt you, but please don't punish our kids for my mistakes. This was the calmest day before the storm. What Chelsea didn't know was that I'd already spoken extensively with a child psychologist and a custody evaluator. Both had reviewed the evidence and agreed that Chelsea's pattern of deception, financial manipulation, and planning to uproot the children's lives without considering their stability was concerning. They'd also noted that despite my work hours, I'd been the more present parent over the past year, attending school events, helping with homework, managing bedtime routines while Chelsea was supposedly at evening workshops. The divorce proceedings began, and Chelsea quickly realized she'd underestimated me. Her attorney tried to paint her as a neglected wife seeking connection, but Patricia systematically demolished that narrative. The bank statements showed regular date nights I'd planned that Chelsea had canceled. Calendar records proved I'd adjusted my work schedule repeatedly to prioritize family time. Testimony from our kids' teachers revealed that I was the parent they called for emergencies, the one who volunteered for field trips, the one who knew their friends' names. And then there was Hank. Before I continue, please pause the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new interesting stories. Thank you. Patricia's investigator had been thorough. He discovered that Hank was actually still married, separated but not divorced. His wife, Jennifer, was living in Arizona with their teenage son, and according to the private investigator, she had no idea Hank was in a serious relationship. When Patricia's team contacted Jennifer and showed her the evidence of Hank's affair with Chelsea, including the misuse of company aircraft, Jennifer was furious. He told me he needed time to sort himself out, Jennifer told me during a phone call Patricia had arranged. He said he was focusing on his career, that once he got established with the charter company, we'd work on our marriage. All while he was sleeping with your wife? Using company planes for romantic flights? That's his job, his career. He's risked everything. Jennifer contacted Executive Air Services with the documentation. Within 48 hours, Hank was suspended pending investigation. Within a week he was terminated. The company issued a statement about violation of professional conduct standards and misuse of company resources. His pilot's license wasn't revoked, but his reputation in the small world of private aviation was destroyed. No charter company would hire him after word spread about what he'd done. You won't guess how this all ends. Chelsea fell apart. The strong, confident woman who'd been planning her escape became increasingly desperate. Hank, now unemployed and facing his own divorce, couldn't offer her the exciting new life he'd promised. Their relationship, built on stolen moments and fantasy, couldn't survive the harsh light of reality. Within 3 weeks of Hank's termination, they'd broken up. Chelsea tried to contact him repeatedly, but he'd blocked her number, moved back to Arizona to try to salvage his marriage with Jennifer. The divorce mediation was brutal. Chelsea's attorney tried to argue for an equal split of assets, but Patricia presented the evidence of financial misconduct. The mediator, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, was not sympathetic to Chelsea's position. Mrs. Thompson, you systematically deceived your husband, stole from joint accounts and committed fraud using business resources. You're fortunate that Mr. Thompson isn't pursuing criminal charges. I suggest you accept a reasonable settlement before he changes his mind. In the end, we divided the assets, but not equally. I kept the restaurant, our retirement accounts, and the equity in the apartment. Chelsea received her personal savings, minus the amount she'd stolen, which she had to return, and some furniture. The custody arrangement gave me primary physical custody, with Chelsea receiving alternating weekends and one evening per week. The judge cited her pattern of deception and poor decision-making regarding family stability in his ruling. But what happened afterward, that's worth hearing. Chelsea moved into a small studio apartment across town. She had to pick up extra classes at the yoga studio to make ends meet. Her friends gradually distanced themselves when the full story emerged. Sarah, whose innocent birthday post had started everything, felt tremendous guilt and stopped speaking to Chelsea entirely. The yoga studio where Chelsea worked started losing clients who'd heard rumors about the affair and didn't want to associate with someone they saw as morally compromised. I thought I'd feel satisfaction watching her life unravel, but instead I felt empty. The revenge I'd carefully orchestrated had worked perfectly, but it didn't heal the wounds. It didn't restore the 16 years we'd lost. It didn't erase the memories of her laughing in another man's arms or the feeling of watching her fly away with him while I sat helpless in a parking lot. Our children struggled. They knew their parents were divorcing, but not all the ugly details. I made sure of that. They didn't need to carry the weight of their mother's betrayal. They needed stability, consistency, love. So I provided it even when I was drowning in my own pain. Months passed. The divorce finalized. Life established a new normal. I threw myself into the restaurant, expanding the menu, renovating the dining room. The business thrived. The kids adjusted to the custody schedule. Chelsea showed up for her visitation times, but she was different. Quieter, subdued, lacking the vibrancy that had first attracted me to her 17 years ago. Then came an unexpected phone call one evening in November, 8 months after the divorce finalized. It was Chelsea's mother, Patricia, not my attorney, my ex-mother-in-law, who I'd always liked despite everything. "John, I need to talk to you about Chelsea. Can we meet for coffee?" We met at a small cafe near the restaurant. Patricia looked tired, aged by the stress of the past year. "Chelsea's not doing well," she said without preamble. "She's depressed, barely functioning. She teaches her classes on autopilot and spends the rest of her time alone in that tiny apartment. She made terrible mistakes, I know that. But John, she's still my daughter, and she's destroying herself with guilt and regret. What do you want me to do?" I asked, not unkindly. "I want you to talk to her. Really talk to her. Not as her ex-husband, not as someone she wronged, but as someone who once loved her enough to build a life together." I didn't want to. I'd moved on, or at least I was trying to. But Patricia's eyes held such desperate hope that I found myself agreeing. 2 days later, I met Chelsea at a park near our old apartment. She looked thin, her yoga-toned body now almost gaunt. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. We walked in silence for a while. Finally she spoke. "I don't expect forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. I destroyed our family, hurt our children, threw away everything good in my life for a fantasy. I was selfish and cruel and stupid." "Yes," I agreed. "You were all of those things." She flinched but nodded. "I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I did it. The therapist says I was struggling with a kind of identity crisis, feeling like I'd lost myself in being a wife and mother. But that's just an explanation, not an excuse. I made choices, bad choices, and I have to live with the consequences." After this moment, her life was never the same. "What do you want, Chelsea?" I asked. "Why did you agree to meet?" "I want to apologize. Really apologize, not just say the words. I want you to know that I understand the magnitude of what I did. And I want to tell you that despite everything, you didn't deserve what I put you through. You were a good husband. A great father. I was the problem, not you." We talked for over an hour. She told me about her therapy, about the work she was doing to understand herself, about her determination to be a better person, a better mother. I told her about the restaurant, about the kids' recent school achievements, about the life we were building without her. As we parted, she touched my arm gently. "John, I know we can't go back. I know I destroyed too much. But maybe someday we could be friends? For the kids' sake." I didn't answer immediately. The anger I'd carried for months had faded into something more complicated, a mix of sadness, disappointment, and a strange kind of understanding. "Maybe," I finally said. "But it'll take time." Over the following months, something unexpected happened. Chelsea started showing up more consistently for the kids. She remembered their school events, brought thoughtful snacks to soccer games, engaged with their homework. She was trying, genuinely trying, to be the mother they needed. And slowly, grudgingly, I had to admit she was succeeding. Our interactions remained polite but distant. Until one evening when our daughter Emma had a medical emergency, a severe allergic reaction that sent her to the hospital. Chelsea and I spent 12 hours in the emergency room together, our previous animosity forgotten in the face of our shared terror for our child. When Emma was finally stable and sleeping peacefully, Chelsea and I sat in the waiting room, exhausted and drained. "I can't lose her," Chelsea whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I can't lose them. They're all I have left." "You won't lose them," I said, and I meant it. "You're their mother. Nothing will ever change that." She looked at me with such raw vulnerability that I saw, perhaps for the first time in years, the woman I'd fallen in love with. Not the deceiver, not the cheater, but the scared, flawed human being trying desperately to make amends for her mistakes. The final twist of this story surprised even me. Over the next several months, Chelsea and I began communicating more regularly. Not romantically, that bridge was burned beyond repair, but as co-parents who genuinely wanted the best for their children. We had dinners together with the kids, celebrated birthdays as a united front, even spent Christmas morning opening presents together in my apartment. The kids blossomed under this new arrangement. They had two parents who, while no longer married, could be in the same room without tension, who could laugh at old memories without bitterness, who modeled forgiveness and growth instead of eternal resentment. Chelsea continued her therapy. She also started a support group for people who'd sabotaged their own lives through infidelity, becoming a sponsor for others struggling with guilt and shame. She threw herself into rebuilding her relationship with her children, attending every event, being present in a way she hadn't been even before the affair. And me? I started dating again cautiously. I learned to trust, though it came slowly. I expanded the restaurant into a second location. I watched my children thrive. And sometimes, when Chelsea and I were planning a school event or discussing our kids' futures, I caught glimpses of the partnership we might have had if we'd both been wiser, more communicative, more willing to fight for each other instead of running from our problems. One evening, after a particularly successful school concert where both kids had performed, Chelsea asked if we could talk privately. We walked to a nearby coffee shop while her parents watched the kids. "I need to tell you something," she said, stirring her latte nervously. "I've been offered a job in Portland. A really good job managing a wellness center. It's a big opportunity, career advancement, better pay." My stomach dropped. "You're leaving?" "I don't know. That's what I wanted to talk to you about." She looked at me seriously. "The kids are settled here. They're happy. They have both of us. If I move, I'd only see them on holidays and summer breaks. That's not enough. So I'm thinking of turning it down." "Chelsea, you can't sacrifice your career for—" "It's not a sacrifice," she interrupted. "I've learned that some things matter more than advancement or excitement or new adventures. Our children matter more. Being present in their lives matters more. This job will be there in a few years when they're older and more independent. Right now they need me here." I felt something shift in my chest. This was growth. Real, meaningful growth. "That's a mature decision," I said quietly. She smiled sadly. "I'm trying to finally grow up, John. Only took me 38 years and destroying my life to figure it out." We talked for another hour about co-parenting strategies, about the kids' upcoming transitions to middle school, about maintaining stability during adolescence. It felt almost like the conversations we'd had years ago when we were partners, before distance and resentment had poisoned everything. As we walked back to pick up the kids, Chelsea stopped and turned to me. "John, I know we're divorced. I know we'll never be married again. But I need you to know something. The therapy, the work I've done on myself, it's made me realize that what we had was real and valuable, and I destroyed it. Not because you weren't enough, but because I couldn't see what was right in front of me. You deserved better than what I gave you." "We both could have done better," I said, surprising myself. "I wasn't perfect either. I let the restaurant consume me. I stopped making you feel seen and valued. We both contributed to the distance between us." "Maybe," she acknowledged. "But I'm the one who chose betrayal instead of communication. The truth was more complicated than either of us could fully articulate. Yes, Chelsea had betrayed me. Yes, she'd lied and stolen and planned to destroy our family. But I'd also let our marriage become comfortable and stale, had stopped pursuing her, had taken her presence for granted. We'd both failed, just in different ways." The months continued to pass. Chelsea turned down the Portland job and instead partnered with a friend to open a small yoga studio in San Bernardino. It was a risk, but it gave her the flexibility to be available for the kids while building something of her own. Our children entered middle school. They brought home friends, joined clubs, navigated the complicated social dynamics of adolescence. And they did it with two parents who showed up, who communicated, who proved that divorce didn't have to mean destruction. I never forgot what Chelsea had done. The betrayal would always be part of our story. But I also learned that people are capable of change, that mistakes don't have to define someone forever, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting but rather choosing to move forward without carrying the weight of anger. 1 year after that conversation at the coffee shop, Chelsea and I were at our son Marcus's soccer championship game. The team won and Marcus ran over to us, sweaty and grinning. "Did you see that goal I scored?" he asked excitedly. "We saw everything," Chelsea said, hugging him. "You were amazing, buddy," I added, ruffling his hair. Marcus looked between us, his expression suddenly serious. "I'm glad you guys are friends now. It makes everything easier." After he ran back to his teammates, Chelsea and I stood side by side, watching our son celebrate with his friends. "We did good," she said quietly. "Yeah," I agreed. "We did." The story didn't end with dramatic revenge or total destruction. It ended with something more complex and realistic. Two flawed people learning to be better for the sake of their children. Chelsea had made catastrophic mistakes and she'd paid for them. She'd lost her marriage, her financial security, her reputation, and her relationship with the man she thought would save her. But she'd gained something too: self-awareness, genuine remorse, and the determination to be better. As for me, I learned that justice and revenge aren't the same thing. I'd gotten justice through the legal system, through evidence and consequences. But revenge, true revenge, would have meant holding on to my anger forever, poisoning every interaction, teaching my children that mistakes are unforgivable. Instead, I chose something harder. I chose to see Chelsea as a complete person, not just the worst thing she'd ever done. Did she deserve to be forgiven? That's not for me to say. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about releasing yourself from the prison of perpetual resentment. Did our family stay together? Not in the traditional sense. We were divorced, living separately, moving on with our lives. But we were still a family, just a different configuration than before. The restaurant continued to thrive. Chelsea's yoga studio found its footing. Our children grew and flourished. And sometimes, during school events or family celebrations, someone who didn't know our history would assume we were still married, would comment on what a nice family we made. Chelsea and I would exchange a knowing glance but wouldn't correct them. Because in a way we were still a family. Just not the one we'd started with 16 years ago. Life rarely gives us the endings we expect. Chelsea's affair with Hank had seemed like an insurmountable catastrophe, the kind of betrayal that destroys everything in its path. And it did destroy our marriage. But it didn't destroy us. Through pain and consequences and hard work, we'd both become better versions of ourselves. Not together, but not entirely apart either. That birthday flight that started everything, the one that showed me the truth about my wife's double life, had seemed like the end of the world. In many ways it was. It ended the illusion of my perfect marriage, the comfort of ignorance, the safety of trusting completely. But it also forced both of us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, our choices, and what we truly valued. Chelsea never flew in a private plane again. Hank never recovered his aviation career and eventually moved to a different state to start over in a completely different field. Sarah and Chelsea slowly rebuilt their friendship, though it would never be quite what it was before. And I learned that betrayal doesn't have to be the final word in anyone's story. Our children don't know all the details of what happened. They know their parents divorced, that their mother made mistakes, that their father was hurt. But they also know that both parents love them unconditionally, that people can change and grow, and that forgiveness is possible even when forgetting isn't. Was this pro-revenge? Nuclear revenge? In the moment, when I was systematically dismantling Chelsea's plans and watching her world collapse, it certainly felt that way. I'd exposed her affair, destroyed her relationship with Hank, secured favorable divorce terms, and left her scrambling to rebuild her life from scratch. But revenge has a way of feeling hollow once you achieve it. The real victory wasn't in her suffering, it was in our collective healing. The final chapter of this story is still being written. Our children will graduate high school, go to college, build their own lives. Chelsea and I will continue co-parenting, attending graduations and weddings, becoming grandparents someday. We'll never remarry each other, that ship has sailed and sunk, but we've forged something perhaps more valuable, a functional post-divorce relationship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Sometimes, late at night when the restaurant is closed and I'm alone with my thoughts, I wonder what would have happened if Sarah had never posted that Instagram photo. Would Chelsea have eventually left anyway? Would I have remained oblivious? Would our marriage have limped along in quiet misery for years? I'll never know. What I do know is that the truth, however painful, was better than the lie. Discovering Chelsea's betrayal hurt more than I thought possible. But it also freed me to build a more authentic life, to teach my children about integrity and consequences, to find peace not in revenge but in growth. Chelsea once told me during one of our post-divorce conversations that losing me was the biggest mistake of her life. I believe her. But I also believe that some mistakes are necessary teachers. Her affair taught her about the difference between excitement and fulfillment, between fantasy and reality. My response taught me about the difference between justice and vengeance, between holding grudges and moving forward. In the end, we didn't destroy each other. We both survived, changed, and found a way to coexist for the sake of something bigger than our wounded egos, our children's well-being. That's not the dramatic ending this story seemed headed toward when I first discovered those messages and followed her to that airfield. But it's a more honest one, a more human one. The family didn't stay intact in the way it started. But in a strange way it became stronger, not despite the divorce but because of how we chose to handle it. Chelsea faced consequences for her actions but also found redemption through genuine change. I got justice but learned that perpetual anger serves no one. Our children saw their parents at their worst but also witnessed the power of accountability and forgiveness. This wasn't the story either of us would have written for ourselves. But it's the one we lived, and somehow we both came out the other side better than we went in. Not together but not enemies either. Just two people who once loved each other, made catastrophic mistakes, and chose to prioritize their children's futures over their own pain. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.